Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Yigit Ihlamur of Vela Partners. Yigit, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hall. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for hosting me.
Great. So what was your background before investing in early stage companies?
So my background is simply anything with computers, I would say. Like I started getting my hands on computers like when I was 3 years old, and it was my only hobby for a very long time. And the reason is that like I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My father was a technology entrepreneur, carrying his desktop computer at home, coding at night, during the day, selling software. Like this, I observed this in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and I was deeply inspired by this while growing up. So I was exposed to innovation like at a young age, like when most people did not know what computers were. So I observed this impact of innovation, like from a socioeconomic standpoint, and also observe that like an entrepreneur can really create an impact in an emerging market like Turkey, where I grew up. So since then, like I made my life's mission to be in the innovation economy and always wanted to contribute to it. So my background, my professional background is that like to be on the leading edge, like on the innovation side, I had my master's in computer science with a focus in machine learning from Oxford University, and later joined Google, knowing that I would work on innovative projects in Google. And after working for more than 5 years at Google, I wanted to start in something new and innovative, but I just did not know what it was. So for 6 months, I explored many different business ideas, and I realized in principle that I wanted to work with people smarter, more hardworking, more driven than me, so that I can learn every single day of my life. So that's how I, bumped into the business of funding innovative businesses. So my partners and I quickly realized that the venture capital firms fit into the typical recipe of disruption. They overcharge and underserve. So we started automating important pieces of early stage investing, and we built a new venture capital asset class, what we call like venture tech.
Great. So what excites you right now?
What excites me is that, like, if we go back, like, late 1990s, it was all about internet companies. We go back to 2000s, like late 2000s, it was all about mobile companies. What I'm specifically excited about is machine learning companies at the moment. And simply, like, we invest in companies like us, any company using machine learning as a key differentiator. But all like I can get into details of like specifically what those things are, and get into details of like specific sectors and the markets that we get excited about as well.
Great. So quite a few investors listen to our show. What's your advice for those who are first-time investors in startups, in particular in the machine learning and data sector? What do you tell them to do before they write that first check?
Yeah, first off, before they write the first check, make sure that you see enough companies, right? Like you get easily excited about a good story and you start dreaming about what can happen. So I highly recommend seeing at least 20 to 30 companies before making any decision so that you can benchmark those companies. My overall advice at the moment for experienced investors to add recession-proof as well as their criteria to invest, and that's something that we really care about at the moment.
And on the other side of that table, what about CEOs who are starting that company in the machine learning and data sector for the first time? What do you coach them on?
Specifically, data and machine learning space, like one has to think about how to solve that whole start problem, right? Like how do you get enough data to train your algorithms? And once you start finding the data set to train your algorithms, and how do you collect proprietary data set that makes your product better over time? Does the proprietary data set create a flywheel effect Does the user experience get better over time? And does this create a barrier to entry for new players over time as you collect proprietary data sets as your customers use your product? It's kind of hard to assess these right away, but it's important to think about details as an entrepreneur. So overall, my general advice for entrepreneurs is to make sure that you have a Z plan in life. You have a good Z plan that you feel comfortable, then you feel more comfortable to take risks and be aggressive in making innovation and creating innovative business.
Well, great. So let's talk about the state of investing in machine learning in the data sector. The industry is growing very fast, but what are the changes you see coming up with it?
So the changes, typically what we are excited about in the ML data space, machine learning space, is that companies that are making software creation and automation easy, specifically for knowledge workers. One example is a category of example is developer tools, designer tools, data tools, low code, no code tools. These are great examples of approaches one can take to simplify software creation and AI creation. The other stuff that we get excited about in the space is data aggregators, protectors, and data privacy startups. And our key observation is that the data is growing exponentially, and it's difficult to protect that data. It is difficult to aggregate and make meaning out of the data as well. So anything around aggregating, protecting, and making sure that it's compliant is something that we have a high interest in and encourage entrepreneurs to look into this market specifically. And other than that, we observe self-driving car technology is trickling down for simpler use cases. And the reason is that there has been significant investment in self-driving car technologies, as well as as you know, the mobility, such as scooters and things like that. So as a result of that, hardware got cheaper, sensors got cheaper, technology really improved. So we get excited about companies that are applying the tech for simpler use cases than driving a car in a very sophisticated environment. Other than that, we love the creative uses of computer vision, pretty in a stage where it's commercializable, easy to use, for many entrepreneurs, more accessible. So we see a lot of companies using that tech. And lastly, generally, we love looking into hardware-enabled software companies as well. As you know, Peloton is a good example of a good hardware-enabled software company with sensors and so on. It personalizes physical experiences. So those are some of the trends that we like from a tech standpoint on the data and machine learning side. But we also look into socioeconomic and behavioral changes. Is the timing right for this? It could be a great idea. The tech could be there, but the timing may not be right. So few trends that we observe are more people are working from home. How does the work experience and your day experience as an employee or as a founder look like working from home? More people are doing contract and freelancing work. What does it mean? What are the work tools solving those problems? And lastly, the other trend that we see is how users' willingness to pay for premium for superior experiences, such as if you observe some of the trends, such as superhuman targeting power users and charging premium, Calendly solving the scheduling use case that Google Calendar is unable to solve. So we observe that there's this experience or opportunity where one can unbundle some of the use cases that all the products are unable to deliver. So our key focus is being a market-driven investor and observing and analyzing that whether the timing is right or not.
Great. So let's talk about your investment thesis for your fund. What exactly is your thesis for this sector? And can you tell us more about how you came to it?
Yeah, so our investment thesis is actually pretty straightforward. We invest in companies like us, meaning that companies that are using data and machine learning to create a differentiated product. As you know, we are a machine learning and data-driven investment firm. So we live and breathe data collection, aggregation, and filtering through machine learning and machine learning algorithms and other heuristics. So we love companies that are doing the same but solving different problems. So this was kind of like an intuitive investment thesis that we developed over time.
Are there any particular startups, portfolios perhaps that you can talk about that fit that thesis?
Yeah, sure. So we have a few startups that recently that I can talk about. One is a company that solves the cashierless shopping experience, named Grabango.com. So they build Amazon Go experience for large-scale grocers. So that's one example. They use computer vision to create a frictionless consumer shopping experience, which we really like. The other good example is a company that we invested called Bear Robotics. They solve that use case that I talked about earlier, which they use self-driving car technology to solve the problem of bringing food and beverages. So they replace buses in restaurants and large-scale food services. So those are like two good examples, and we love investing in other enabling technologies as well, such as like data tools and so on. But those are like two companies that I can talk to pretty as a good example of the ones that I talked earlier.
So for this sector of machine learning and data, what is the key challenge that most startups face? Is it related to regulatory, or is it the technical issues, or is it the market? But where do you find most companies really struggling in this particular sector?
First of all, I observed that some companies just use machine learning for the sake of using it. And there are some use cases and even some companies that don't necessarily need to use machine learning to solve those problems. Sometimes like 80% of the solution is enough. So as a result of that, like I see entrepreneurs being distracted to build a promising technology without the need of creating it right away at the early stage of the startup. So I believe that the companies that are data-driven and machine learning-driven and have that vision should first reflect on like what is the right approach to solve that problem, and then introduce new technologies over time, not for the sake of doing it. So that's kind of like the trap, and I see that some entrepreneurs, even like us, sometimes we fall into the trap, like how can we use this like cool technology to solve this problem? But actually, we should be all like problem driven.
So you mentioned several applications a moment ago. If you had to pick one or two that are really great opportunities for investors to pursue, which one would you pick out? In other words, what's really heating up out there?
Computer vision. I highly recommend any investor to look into companies that are solving problems using computer vision technology. Reason is that like the algorithm for building it is easier now. You can use off-the-shelf libraries to do that, as well as there are a lot of off-the-shelf components and cameras that one can use, so it's also cheaper. And also the computing side of things are cheaper, and you can do it on the device rather than running the algorithm on the cloud. So these are like all enablers to use this technology at the moment. So I highly recommend investors to look into computer vision enabled creative startups.
Sounds interesting. So in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
We can cover, if you want, since we talk about machine learning, I'm happy to cover how we use machine learning and data to build an innovative investment company.
Yes, that would be interesting. Tell us more.
Sure. So when we looked into investing specifically, we realized that meeting with entrepreneurs, going to events, and getting to know people all around the world is not scalable. You you can only go to so many events, you can only meet so many people. So when we looked into this, the question that we asked ourselves was, how can we scale? How can we scale top of funnel for our business? So we started looking into how we can make it happen and started looking into innovative approaches out there. And that's how we came up with the approach of basically indexing all possible websites and companies that entrepreneurs start and collect data about those companies and build interesting filtering algorithm on top of that. So what we see is that this is happening and this is working. And as a result of that, we observe the more and more investors to look into this space, more and more investors to build this tech stack in their deal flow, as well as like due diligence processes. So we are excited to pioneer this alongside with other investors and startups. So I would be very excited to share more and talk about what we call venture tech, and tech category of investors.
Well, that's great. How did you come up with those techniques?
Those techniques, it's been a creative process, and you kind of do things manually, and then you realize that why am I collecting this data manually? Why am I looking at this manually all the time? It just happens like a few times, and you start asking yourself as an engineer, how can I automate this? So it seemed like it was not something that like we just sat down and whiteboarded in a week and came up with the algorithm. It's been a constant evolution that we embed new data sources and new filtering logic into the algorithm.
And so where do you plan to take it next, if you can talk about it?
Yeah, of course. So the plan for us is that we would like to scale what we're doing at once. So we started the algorithm, we started investing with that, we sourced companies, and we found great companies. Otherwise, we wouldn't have found. So we know that this works. So now the goal is to, in 2020, is to scale this approach and cover more geographies and invest more into the algorithm, productionize it so that we can add features faster to the platform.
Great. We're looking forward to seeing how that goes. How best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
So it would be great if people get in touch with me via Twitter or directly from my email address. My email address is yigit@vela.partners.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes so people can get back in touch with you. I want to thank you for sharing today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Yeah, of course, Al. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.